He's just my ticket to wealth. I'll leave him once I'm rich enough." Those were the words Rachel Montgomery whispered to her lover across a candlelit table, her diamond ring catching the light as if mocking the man who had placed it there. What she didn't know was that her husband, Jonathan Montgomery, stood only a few feet away, close enough to hear every syllable. And in that instant, the quiet architect she dismissed as ordinary became something else entirely. Because Jonathan wasn't the fool she thought he was. He was the heir to a hidden empire, a man who had spent years testing whether love could outlast wealth. Rachel thought she had found her ticket to fortune. What she had really found was her ticket to destruction. The restaurant hummed with soft piano and clinking glasses. Rachel leaned closer to Evan Pierce, her eyes glinting with hunger that had nothing to do with the food. "You'll see soon," she purred, her voice low and dangerous. "Once Jonathan's deals start paying off, I'll have access to everything. He trusts me with the paperwork, the accounts, all of it. He thinks I'm his partner." She let out a laugh sharp enough to slice glass. "Partner? No. I'm just waiting until the nest is full. Then I'll fly." Evan grinned, resting his chin on his fist, the posture of a man who enjoyed another man's downfall. "And when you do?" Rachel's lips curved. "Then it'll be you and me, darling. You'll finally have the life you've been chasing." Jonathan's hand tightened around the stem of his untouched glass at the bar. He had come early to surprise her. He had even tucked white peonies, her supposed favorite, under his chair. Now the petals might as well have been blades. A memory pressed in like fog, his father's study, the smell of polished cedar. His father's hand, weathered but steady, closing around his shoulder. "Silence is a shield, Jonathan. Live small, let them underestimate you. When they reveal themselves, you'll know who they are." He had followed that advice, never flaunting the vast inheritance locked away in trusts and companies his father had built. To Rachel, he was a successful but modest architect, scraping together new projects. She saw potential, but not the empire hidden in plain sight. Rachel's voice dragged him back. "He's careful, Evan, almost boring. But that's why it works. He never questions me. He'll sign what I tell him to. He always does." Jonathan could almost feel the flashbacks overlapping. The gala 3 months ago, Rachel tugging his arm too tightly as she hissed, "If we don't start showing up in something better than that sedan, Jonathan, people will think we don't belong." Or the casual way she had brushed off his sketches with a dismissive, "Dream houses don't pay bills. Big contracts do. You should think bigger." Foreshadowing now shone like neon in his mind. Her ambition hadn't been subtle. It had been dressed as encouragement, camouflaged as love. And he had been blind. Rachel reached across the table, resting her manicured hand over Evan's. "Jonathan's my ladder," she said, her tone sugar-laced poison. "And ladders are only useful until you reach the top." Jonathan didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't break. He let the silence cloak him like armor, his face an unreadable mask. But inside, something shifted. Not just hurt. Not just betrayal. Something sharper. He would not confront her tonight. That would be giving her power. Instead, he would draw from the one thing his father had taught him best, patience. He would let Rachel believe she was winning. He would let her dig her own grave with her own greedy hands. He touched the folded anniversary card in his pocket, his sketch of their first tiny apartment. Once, he believed she loved him in that smallness. Now, he understood the truth. The pianist struck a high note. Rachel laughed again, the laugh of a woman already counting another man's fortune. Jonathan turned quietly, slipped into the night air, and left the peonies behind. The night air bit cold as Jonathan stepped out of the restaurant, but the chill did not reach him. He walked like a man carrying glass inside his chest, afraid that one wrong move would make everything shatter. The streets glowed with neon and traffic, couples passing with laughter spilling behind them. He envied their ignorance. He envied who he himself had been an hour ago. When he reached the house, Rachel's laughter still rang in his ears. He paused at the door, his hand hovering above the handle. Inside, he knew everything would look the same: the polished marble floors Rachel had insisted on, the velvet drapes she claimed were investment pieces, the kitchen that gleamed with unused appliances more for show than sustenance. But tonight he would see all of it differently. He entered quietly. The house smelled faintly of lavender and the expensive candle Rachel had ordered in bulk, claiming it reminded her of Paris. Jonathan had never been to Paris. Rachel had gone once, with her college roommate, and told him endlessly how they dined on the Champs-Élysées. That was when he realized she didn't dream of family traditions, she dreamed of status. He set his keys on the counter, the sound sharp in the silence. The peonies he had retrieved from the restaurant now sat crumpled in his hand, petals bent, stems broken. He tossed them into the trash, the white blooms collapsing like fallen promises. He poured himself a glass of water, but his hand trembled slightly. Not from fear. From calculation. His father's words echoed again: "Patience is the scaffolding of power, son. Never react in the moment. Let them build the trap they think is yours, then reveal it's theirs." Jonathan's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it: Rachel's message: "Working late, don't wait up." He almost laughed, but the sound curdled into something darker. He carried the glass to his study. It was the only room Rachel hadn't bothered to redesign. The walls still bore his father's old maps, the desk was heavy oak scarred with years of planning. Jonathan sat and opened a leather notebook. On the first page, he drew two parallel lines, like the foundation of a house. Above one line he wrote Rachel. Above the other, me. He stared at the lines, steadying his breath. Then he began to sketch stairs, each step a move she would make, and a countermove he would design. Flashback, their prenup. Rachel had laughed, kissed him, and said, "Oh, Jonathan, this is silly paperwork. You know we'll never need this." She had signed quickly, eager to leave for a dinner party, barely glancing at the details. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Jonathan had insisted on a hidden clause, a quiet amendment his father's lawyer had recommended years ago. Infidelity nullifies everything. He tapped the page with his pen, circling the word infidelity. Foreshadowing pressed on him like a silent companion. Rachel thought she had her hand on the reins. But she didn't realize he had spent his life walking through rooms where everyone underestimated him. At architecture firms, clients had mistaken him for an intern. At galas, billionaires overlooked him, thinking he was the hired designer. He had grown comfortable in their blindness. And Rachel had fallen for the same trap. Jonathan whispered to himself, "You'll leave me once you're rich enough, Rachel." He leaned back, eyes cold. "You'll never get the chance." The glass of water sat untouched on the desk, catching the moonlight like a frozen tear. In the silence of the study, a plan began to take shape, brick by brick. Sunday morning sunlight streamed through the wide windows, catching the edge of Rachel's champagne glass. She lounged in silk pajamas, scrolling her phone with lazy precision, pausing only when she saw a picture of one of her friends posing in front of a new Range Rover. Her lips thinned. "We're falling behind, Jonathan," she said without looking up. Jonathan sipped his coffee, black, sitting across the granite kitchen island. He studied her like an architect studying a fault line. "Behind what?" "Behind everyone," Rachel replied, her eyes narrowing as she turned her screen toward him. "Look at this. Jenna and her husband just bought a house in the Hamptons. Do you know what people will think if we keep driving that sedan? People talk." Jonathan set his cup down. "People talk about anything." Rachel gave a laugh that wasn't humor. "You don't understand status, Jonathan. Appearances matter. If you want to be taken seriously as a businessman, you need to act like one." Her words dripped with the same rehearsed sharpness as they had at the gala months earlier. The echo of her voice at the restaurant twisted in his gut, but his face remained unreadable. "I'm an architect," Jonathan said evenly. "My work speaks for itself." "Your work," Rachel countered, "is only as good as the clients it attracts. And clients are impressed by success. Big contracts. Flash. Bold moves." She leaned forward, the glass in her hand catching the light. "It's time you started making bigger investments." He met her gaze steadily. "Like what?" She hesitated, then smiled sweetly. "I've been reading about this development project downtown. Luxury condos. Everyone's getting in early. If we buy in now, we could triple our money in a few years. I can handle the paperwork." "I know you're busy." Jonathan's mind sharpened. It was too perfect. She wanted control, wanted him to trust her with details she could twist into her favor. He remembered her voice with Evan. "He'll sign what I tell him to. He always does." He leaned back, playing the part of the cautious husband. "I don't know, Rachel. Real estate investments are tricky. We'd have to be careful." Rachel reached across, brushing his arm. Her touch was soft, calculated. "Trust me. You always say I have good instincts, don't you?" A flicker of memory, Rachel on their honeymoon, insisting they upgrade their hotel suite to the penthouse, even though he'd booked something simple and cozy. "This is our honeymoon, Jonathan. Don't you want to celebrate in style?" He had given in then. Now he saw it differently. It had never been about celebration. It had been about climbing. Jonathan smiled faintly. "All right. Let's set up a meeting with the project developers. I'll want to see every detail." Rachel's eyes glittered with victory. "You won't regret it." But in his study later that night, Jonathan opened his leather notebook and wrote in neat, sharp letters, "The trap begins." He placed a document on his desk, an investment agreement drafted by his lawyer. On the surface, it looked like the perfect buy-in. But hidden in the fine print, buried where only an expert eye could catch it, was a clause designed to expose Rachel's intentions. Jonathan didn't need to force her hand. He only needed to let her reveal herself. The cafe where Rachel met Evan was tucked into a fashionable corner of the city, exposed brick walls, gold accents, and a crowd of people who ordered cappuccinos not because they loved coffee, but because it was where deals were whispered and alliances were sealed. Rachel slid into the booth across from him, oversized sunglasses still perched on her head though they were indoors. Evan smirked. "You look pleased with yourself." Rachel stirred her latte slowly, savoring the moment. "I am. Jonathan's finally listening to me. I told him about the condo project, and he agreed to let me handle the paperwork. Every detail." She leaned closer, her voice a conspiratorial hush. "Do you know what that means, Evan? He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. He always does." Evan arched an eyebrow, though his grin spread. "So we're closer than ever." Rachel laughed, soft and satisfied. "So close I can taste it. The money's practically ours already. Once this deal is through, I'll have access to everything. Bank accounts. Trusts. Investments." She waved a manicured hand like she was already shopping for her Hamptons house. "Jonathan's too cautious to notice. He thinks I'm being ambitious for him. Poor man doesn't realize he's just laying down the red carpet for me." Foreshadowing dripped through her words. Months earlier, she had told Jonathan after one of his late nights drafting blueprints, "You're too careful. You could be great if you just took risks. Maybe that's why people overlook you." He had smiled then, hiding the sting. Now, in this cafe, her prophecy of underestimation was coming full circle. Except it would not end the way she believed. Meanwhile, Jonathan sat in his study across town, the old oak desk heavy with documents. His lawyer, Martin Hale, a man with silver hair and a voice like gravel, read aloud. Clause 17. If the spouse of the investor is found to have acted in conflict of interest, all shares revert immediately to the principal signer. Jonathan nodded. She won't read that far. She never does. Martin's eyes studied him carefully. You're sure you want to go through with this? Jonathan's pen tapped against the desk, slow, deliberate. She made her choice at that restaurant table, Martin. Now I'm making mine. The lawyer gave a grim nod and slid the documents back across. Then all that's left is to let her sign. Back at the cafe, Evan reached across the table, covering Rachel's hand. You're brilliant, you know that. Soon enough, you won't need him anymore. We'll have it all. Rachel smirked. Jonathan's my ladder, Evan. And ladders aren't meant to last. A shadow crossed Evan's smile, but he said nothing. Jonathan, in his quiet house, set the trap in motion. He arranged a meeting with the developers, ensuring Rachel would feel like she was orchestrating it. He let her believe she was the architect of ambition, when really she was walking straight into a blueprint he had designed long before she spoke those damning words. At the cafe, Rachel lifted her glass in a mock toast. To the future. Evan clinked his cup against hers, the sound small, hollow, and fleeting. Jonathan would soon make sure that future belonged to no one but him. The boardroom gleamed with glass and steel, sunlight spilling across the long mahogany table. Rachel entered first, dressed in a cream suit that whispered money and victory. She carried a leather folder tucked under her arm, the look of a woman already certain of triumph. Behind her, Jonathan walked with measured calm, his face unreadable, his hands steady. At the far end of the table, a projector glowed, documents displayed on the screen. Several men in suits shuffled papers, but Rachel barely noticed. She was too focused on the prize, Jonathan's signature. Jonathan, she said smoothly, sliding into her chair, this is going to change everything for us. You'll thank me when you see the returns. Jonathan looked at her for a long moment, then offered a polite smile. I trust you, Rachel. I always have. The words made her chest swell. She reached across, brushing his hand as though sealing the lie with affection. That's why we work. You focus on the designs, I'll focus on the future. Martin Hale, Jonathan's lawyer, cleared his throat. Before we begin, Mr. Montgomery has a short presentation. Rachel frowned faintly. Presentation. Jonathan rose, remote in hand. The projector shifted to a grainy video. The cafe clatter filled the room, cups clinking, voices humming. Then Rachel's own words played, clear and damning. He's just my ticket to wealth. I'll leave him once I'm rich enough. Rachel's face drained of color. Her voice continued, crueler now in front of strangers. Jonathan's my ladder. And ladders aren't meant to last. A silence heavier than steel fell over the room. One of the developers shifted uncomfortably. Another lawyer coughed. Evan Pierce's name hung unspoken in the air. Rachel snapped forward. Jonathan, this is out of context. Her voice cracked like glass. Jonathan pressed the remote. The screen changed to documents. Bank accounts, transfers, emails Rachel had sent from her private address. All the trails she thought she had hidden. You wanted me to sign, Rachel, Jonathan said quietly, his tone calm but lethal. But the papers in front of you aren't for an investment. They're for forfeiture. Every cent you thought you were about to control has already been transferred into the Montgomery Foundation. Irrevocable. Her hands shook. You can't. He cut her off, his voice sharper now. And as for the prenup you laughed off years ago, you should have read the amendment you signed. Infidelity voids everything. You walk away with nothing. Rachel's chest rose and fell, panic flashing across her eyes. She turned desperately to the men around the table. You can't let him do this. He's lying. He can't. But the men avoided her gaze. The law was airtight. Jonathan leaned down, his eyes level with hers. You wanted wealth, Rachel. Now you'll have humiliation instead. Her lips trembled, words failing her for the first time in years. Jonathan straightened, buttoned his jacket, and nodded to Martin. Close the meeting. The documents were gathered. The projector clicked off. Rachel sat frozen, her painted nails digging into her palms, the sound of her own betrayal echoing in her ears. Jonathan walked out without looking back. For the first time, the man she thought was ordinary left her behind, leaving silence heavier than any fortune. Rachel stumbled out of the boardroom minutes later, her heels clattering against the marble floor. The cream suit she had chosen for power now looked too bright, too sharp against her paling skin. She clutched her phone in trembling hands, dialing Evan over and over. The line rang, then clicked. "Evan, pick up," she hissed, her voice cracking. When he finally answered, his tone was flat, already detached. "Rachel. I can't be involved in this." Her heart dropped. "What are you talking about? This is our plan." "You told me. I told you what you wanted to hear." His voice carried the coldness of self-preservation. "But Jonathan, he's dangerous in ways you didn't see. He just torched your reputation in front of half the city's investors. Do you really think I'd risk mine for you?" Rachel's breath caught. "You coward." But the line had already gone dead. She stood there, the phone sliding from her hand, her reflection fractured in the polished marble beneath her. For the first time in years, Rachel Montgomery had no audience, no admirer, no lifeline. Only the weight of her own words replaying in her head. "He's just my ticket to wealth. I'll leave him once I'm rich enough." Behind her, the glass doors hissed open. Jonathan emerged, flanked by Martin Hale and two trustees. His face was calm, unreadable, as though nothing that had just happened carried any weight. He paused when he reached her. "Jonathan," Rachel's voice broke, desperation flooding her tone. "Please. You have to understand. I didn't mean it. I was just saying what Evan wanted to hear." He studied her with eyes that no longer carried warmth. Only clarity. "You didn't mean it when you said it at the restaurant? Or when you said it at the cafe? Or when you planned to sign away my legacy today?" Rachel shook her head violently. "It was a mistake. You know I love you. I was stupid. Don't throw away what we built." She reached for his arm, but he stepped back, her hand hanging in the air. Jonathan's voice was quiet, but it struck harder than any shout. "We didn't build anything, Rachel. I did. You climbed. And when you thought you'd reached the top, you tried to kick away the ladder." Tears streaked her cheeks, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "Give me another chance. Please. I can change." Jonathan's jaw tightened. For a moment, the memory of the girl he married flickered. The way she used to smile in their tiny apartment, curled up on the floor with takeout boxes and paint-stained sweatshirts. But then he remembered the gala, the car, the laughter across the restaurant table. That woman was gone. "You wanted wealth," Jonathan said, his words slicing clean. "Now you'll learn what it means to live without it." Her knees buckled, and she sank against the wall, sobbing. The trustees passed without looking at her, their footsteps echoing coldly. Jonathan turned, his back straight, his step steady. For him, this wasn't victory. It wasn't even revenge. It was closure. Behind him, Rachel's voice cracked in the empty lobby, a cry swallowed by the cavernous ceiling. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. For the first time in their marriage, Jonathan Montgomery walked away, and Rachel was left with nothing but the ruins of her own ambition. Months bled into one another like watercolors left in the rain. The Montgomery name remained intact, stronger, even, after the scandal, while Rachel's vanished from every circle that once embraced her. The Hamptons' brunches stopped inviting her. The friends who once envied her clothes and vacations now whispered about her betrayal over champagne flutes. Even her family kept their distance, murmuring words like embarrassment and selfish. Rachel moved into a cramped apartment on the edge of the city, its peeling wallpaper and humming radiator a cruel echo of the luxury she had once mocked. The cream suit that once symbolized her victory hung in the back of her closet, unworn, a relic of arrogance. She found work where she could, answering phones at a boutique firm, serving wine at weekend events, but each paycheck barely covered rent. Sometimes, she caught her reflection in shop windows and hardly recognized the woman staring back. No diamond ring, no sharp smile, no audience. Only exhaustion. At night, when the city hushed, she would replay that boardroom scene in her head. The projector, the voices, Jonathan's calm words. You wanted wealth, Rachel. Now you'll learn what it means to live without it. His voice haunted her more than Evan's betrayal, more than the whispers, more than her empty bank account. Because Jonathan had been right. She had built her entire life on a lie, and when the lie crumbled, so did she. Across town, Jonathan's life unfolded differently. He continued to live simply, though now the world knew more about his true wealth. The Montgomery Foundation, revealed in the aftermath of Rachel's downfall, expanded into schools and housing projects. Jonathan was no longer underestimated, investors sought him out, journalists called him the quiet architect of fortune, and yet he kept his circle small. He didn't flaunt cars or suits. He still sketched late into the night, lines and angles filling his notebooks, houses rising from imagination to blueprint. His legacy wasn't measured in what he owned but in what he built. Sometimes, on walks through the city, he would pass couples laughing over coffee or arguing about groceries. He would pause, a faint smile crossing his lips, remembering what he had once wanted, ordinary love. He no longer searched for it with desperation. He had learned something sharper: love without trust is only decoration. One rainy afternoon, as Jonathan oversaw a groundbreaking for a new community center, a journalist asked him quietly, "Do you ever regret it? Losing her?" Jonathan looked out at the wet earth, the first shovels breaking ground. He thought of Rachel's laughter at that restaurant, the words she had whispered like poison. Then he thought of his father's voice, "Silence is a shield, son." Regret? Jonathan said softly. No. Some losses are gifts in disguise. That night, he returned home to his study, where the old oak desk still bore his father's maps. He placed a fresh sheet of paper on it and began sketching. The sound of his pencil was steady, certain, like a man building a future brick by brick. And somewhere across town, in a dim apartment, Rachel sat alone, clutching a glass of cheap wine, staring at the empty walls that echoed with everything she had lost. She had chased wealth. What she found was ruin.